All right, let's look at putting a curve in now on the ground plane or the floor, first floor level, so that we can we'll use it, define it as, let's say, a walking path through a room, maybe connecting to an entry door and an exit door. And that walking path will then have the ceiling respond to it and the size of the panels and or the color of the ceiling panels that happen. So we have to start off with a Nurbs curve, and we're going to use a Nurbs curve. And if we can see how we find that, let me just close these back off again. And under geometry, we can go to curves. And we could design these curves many ways, but Nurbs curve is really one of the more flexible ones. And we're going to do it by points. So this idea of getting a curve, we need some points to start with. And so we're going to use our points by coordinate. I'm going to right click it, and I could copy and paste, but that would leave all of the, well, I'll show you. Let me demonstrate. If I do copy and paste, I carry all of the wires that came with the other one. So I don't want to use those. So I have to pull them off. And I want to make sure that this is visible for the this part of our instruction. So there we have our point showing up, our first Nurbs point, but we need a multiple set of points. So actually what I'll do is I'll go ahead and we need at least 3 points. So I'll do Control C and paste again, and I'll line these up underneath each other. And this idea of being neat about your layout really is helpful as we move along. So we have, let's say 3 points. Right now they're all over the top of each other, and that's not very useful. So let's make a series of numbers that we can use to change our coordinates. So I'm going to use a little shortcut again. I'm going to use a code block, and that'll allow us to put a bunch of numbers in that we can use to input into our directions. And in this case, I'm going to use a technique where I put, let's say 0. It's going to be between 0 and 20, the numbers. So I'll do 0, semicolon, return, say 10, semicolon, return, 14, semicolon, return, and 20, which is the end of our room space, so to speak. And now when I click off of that, you'll notice these little wires representing the 0 point and so forth and so on. So now I can actually move some of these points along. So if we're happy, let's say, with this point being at 0, but we'd like to move it up in the y-axis a little bit, let's say we'll move it up 10. I'll click on this, and you'll notice now this moves up in the y-axis by 10 points. And let's say we want to exit the room on the same side, but 20 points out. 20 points in this direction, 10 points in that direction. So now if I put in the same y here on the end point, I've got another point under there, but I want to move it out in the x direction 20 points. So I'm going to grab the 20 and put it here. And now we have a starting point and an ending point. Now the question is, if we were to move around here, I want to see if these are it's a little hard to tell with perspective, but I believe that's out to the edge of that grid system. Actually, let's look at it right from the top view. Yeah, there's perspective, so the points are convergent. So it's really hard to tell right at this moment whether those points exist right on top of each other. Actually, we could go back out to Dynamo and check by going to the top view. And we can see now that we have our 0, 0 point, our 10 point and 0, and our 20 point and 10 point. 10 point y, 20 point x. So we're in good alignment with that. So let's go, now we're going to take this point and move it somewhere in this area and offset it a little bit. So I'm going to go back to Dynamo, and I'm going to select the definition tool and make sure so that our nodes show up. And we want this to really be about halfway. So I could pick y. I could give us a halfway point for both of those. So if I select this right now, this one will turn blue, and it shows you the blue means that it's probably just the only difference. The only thing left to select is the z value. All of these are going to be z is 0 because we want them sitting on the floor plane. but we would like to offset this one a little bit, maybe in the Y direction. So instead of making this halfway, I'm going to make it a little more than halfway. Whoops, the wrong point. Let me do, I wanted to do the center point. And now we have that offset a little bit. Now we have a little problem. We're all set to put some points in here to define our curve. But if I put one point into the Nurbs curve, it won't work. And if I try to put, because it doesn't have enough points to determine a curve, and if I put multiple points in, each one will disconnect the other one. So there's a tool that allows us to gather these points together, and that's called list create. So I'm going to right click and find that definition just by starting to type in list. This is a very common function that we use. And this allows us to combine a bunch of items into a list. So I'm going to add 3 of them, and I'm going to plug these points into it. And if you look now, we have a list of 3 points, and I can now plug that list into these points, and now I've generated our Nurbs curve. So now our next step, after when we pick up on the next clip, will be to make some kind of analysis or relationship between the ceiling grid, the points in the ceiling, and the Nurbs curve. And that's next.